Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Time with Junebug. That's me, and it's been a day. Heck, it's been a 24 hours. But I'm still gonna record this because it's gotta get done. Why do I say that? I'm not on a strict schedule. I'm not monetized. Not many people watch these, but it's just I gotta do it. My brain says I have to. Oh, also, if the Dinky Susan, the orange cat, the fuzzy Cheeto, she has been meowing a lot at me, showing me her catches is the toy birds we have for them. And she's bringing them to me. So if she does start to meow like a crazy lady, she wants to show me she caught a bird. A bird. Just if you hear the meowing in the background. Anyway, we're just jumping right in. This case pisses me off. It'll probably piss you off too, so here we go. Today we are talking about Emani Moss, and this happened in October of 2013. And I always say the age of the victims in case anything with children bothers you. And unfortunately, she was a child. She was 10. So if that bothers you, you could click off. I will not be offended. I get it. Because as I said, this is rough. It pisses me off. And this takes place in Lawrenceville, Georgia. And I guess the teeniest silver lining in the whole wide world is that it's a solved case. So a third warning now. Yes, this is sad and pretty rough. I will not probably going into the nitty-gritty details because it hurts my heart. So let's start with who Emani was. So Emani Gabrielle Moss was born April 23rd of 2003 in Gwinnett County, Georgia, to her mother, I don't know her name, and her dad, Eman. I assume she was named after her dad. Now, said her mom was addicted to drugs and she surrendered her parental rights, so her dad got full custody. I can't quite remember if it was like at the hospital right after giving birth, but I don't think it took very long for her to surrender the parental rights. Now, she has 4 other siblings from her mom, and her mom surrendered all of her children. I don't think she retained custody of any of her kids. And she has at least 2 siblings from her dad in the future, like from dad and Emani's future stepmom. Now, from the pictures I've seen, she is an adorable little girl, still stinking cute. She was described as, quote, bright and beautiful and full of life, end quote. She loved reading, dancing, cooking, making up songs, and she loved going to church with grandma, which is adorable. And she even loved school, from what I read, which she sounds like an impressive, smart little child. And yes, she was very smart from the anecdotes I read about her. She's just a smart, bright child with a great future ahead of her. For example, when she was 3, only 3, she attended a dance school where she studied ballet. And when she was 5, she attended a music school where she took guitar lessons. I can't imagine doing that at 3 and 5, but she was doing it. Now, her nickname appears to be Angel Face because her family said, quote, her presence would light up a room and her spirit would be felt. She was an angel on earth, end quote. Which, oh my gosh, it could be the emotions of the last 24 hours, but I made my eyes tear up a little bit. I forgot that exact quote when I wrote it down. Unfortunately, not everyone saw her as an angel on earth, especially one person in particular. And let's enter this shitty person. We'll just cut to the chase. She's a shitty person. Let's enter Emani's stepmom, Tiffany Nicole Moss. And I do want to preference in case someone is familiar with this case. Her dad wasn't great either, but I'll get to that later. In my opinion, Tiffany is worse. And I think the courts agreed too. So, homegirl Tiffany, she was born July 20th, 1983. So she's currently 43 or 44. Now, I can't quite remember when I started doing the research for this. So she could be 44. I don't know if I started research before or after the 20th. It doesn't matter. Now, I don't know anything else about her background, and I don't really care, because she sucks. But, horrifyingly, she was a preschool teacher, and she liked to attend or regularly attended Freedom Christian Church, where she met Emani's dad, Eman. They would marry of July 2009 when Emani was nearly 6 and have the 2 kids I mentioned earlier. I believe they have a son and a daughter. And from what was said, Tiffany was nice and a decent mother to her biological children, but not Emani, her stepdaughter. So, unfortunately, we're gonna the timeline of the abuse. It seems Emani was abused right away. I don't know if it necessarily, if Tiffany waited until they were married or what, but I honestly don't know how long they dated before getting married. But it didn't seem to take Tiff long to start just not liking Emani for some reason. So March 2010, Emani told a school nurse she was afraid to go home with a bad report card because she said she would get hurt. But she said, to this nurse, she said her stepmom hit her with a curtain rod, and then the nurse did give her an exam, I guess, and found scabs, bruises, and welts all over her. So she was telling the truth. And so the nurse took her to police headquarters, which, thank you, nurse. So after that, Tiffany was arrested and charged with first-degree child cruelty. She stated she hit Emani 3 times after Emani didn't do her homework, because a kid not doing their homework warrants whacking them with a curtain rod, I guess, in Tiffany's mind. But Tiffany did plead guilty. She was given 5 years of probation, and her and Eman had to take parenting classes. She also, thankfully, lost her job. I don't know why. She was a preschool teacher. Now, during this time, which is about a 6-month time period, Emani lives with her grandma, Robin, and her grades improved, and she just seemed to be doing better overall. She seemed happier again. Then, unfortunately, Emani was later returned after the 6 months to her dad, and her grandma, Robin, fought to retain custody, but it didn't work, unfortunately. And once Emani returned, the abuse would start nearly right away again. Twice in July of 2012, so we're jumping ahead a little bit, Emani would run away from home. The first time was because she said Tiffany tied her up with a belt and put her in a cold shower, which is Tiffany, how do you even think of that? That's a cruel and unusual punishment. Now, police were involved. Nothing happened since Tiffany said Emani was lying. And the police, I guess, were okay, just ignoring the history of abuse there, but whatever. Now, the second time Emani ran away was, I put quotations around, just because Tiffany was so mean to her. I don't know if there was one particular incident like the first time, but she was just sick of Tiffany and how Tiffany treated her. So police found her sleeping in some bushes, unfortunately. I don't know how long she was gone. I think maybe a day, 2 at the absolute max. And again, police did nothing about this. Well, they obviously found her and brought her home from the bushes, but there was no repercussions to Tiffany or Eman. They just returned Emani back to this not great household. And I do want to note, this whole time, from Tiff and her dad getting married to where we currently are on the timeline, they do move around a lot in the area. Sometimes they were living with family, sometimes they weren't. Eman was not home a lot due to work, so when he was in charge of the kids on the weekends, he started noticing Emani would eat a lot, which I guess if you only see your kid on the weekend, essentially, you could say, maybe because she's growing. I don't know. But I guess he noted it, but didn't find it altogether too concerning. Now we're jumping ahead to May of 2013. That is when the family were visiting, Emani's household was visiting her aunt's house for Mother's Day. And her family noticed her hair was really chopped short and really it was chopped roughly. And she was acting really timid. And then when asked about the hair, her family was why does her hair look like that? Tiffany said, quote, "If you act ugly, you should look ugly," end quote. I don't even know what would warrant that. From what I could tell from anecdotes from her family, she was a lovely little child. So end of the 2013 school year, so a little bit after Mother's Day, I guess it depends when Mother's Day fell that year, Tiff and her dad, Emani's dad, decided to homeschool her the next year. I don't know why. I'm guessing, like, in my opinion, because Tiffany is so shitty, she just wanted to torment Emani more. But obviously that's just my opinion. And my opinion towards Tiffany is kind of biased in the fact that I think she absolutely sucks, if you couldn't tell. So when, like, her family, her supportive, loving family, learns that she's going to be homeschooled this next school year, they report this to the GDFCS, which is the Georgia Division of Family and Children Services. So I'll just probably say GDFCS from now on, because that's a long name. And are we surprised? They do nothing. And honestly, they haven't really done anything at this point either. Neither has, like, the police. And it wasn't just this one instance. The GDFCS had been alerted that Emani was being abused. They obviously can have access to Tiffany's record and, like, the whole probation thing. And they've also were told that Emani's looking really thin. And again, they still did nothing. Now, this is the part of the video where it's really rough. And again, I'm gonna leave out some info due to it's pretty graphic and sad. But it turns out that Mother's Day party would be the last time most of her family would ever see her. So late summer, the family moved. Eman worked 2 jobs. First was from early in the morning to late afternoon, and the second was from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. So Tiff was nearly doing all the childcare, which it does legit sound like he did have the multiple jobs. Like, that's not just something they made up. Like, he was literally just working all the time, it seemed. During this time, Tiffany would, I'm gonna put quotations around, Tiffany would start starving Emani, because there was already instances of her looking thinner, and she would just keep Emani confined to her room. So much so, she, like, just kept her in her room, that the neighbors in, I believe, their apartment complex thought the couple only had 2 children. Tiffany's 2 biological children. They thought that is all they had, was just the 2 children. They didn't know about the eldest, 3rd child that was just being shut into her room and starved. Because Tiffany was feeding and taking care of her biological kids just fine. They could leave the apartment. I don't know if they were in school or also getting homeschooled, but they seemed to be treated well enough. I don't honestly know. I wouldn't be surprised if she also abused them, like, a little bit, because, you know, just given the context here. But they were definitely treated better than Emani. But some of these imbalances with the care for the kids was Tiffany would obviously make meals, and she would take pictures of the meals to send to Eman, kind of as like a, look at, I made food. But she wouldn't feed any to Emani. She would just feed herself and the 2 bio kids. And then she would also ask him, I don't know if this was multiple instances or just one time, but she would ask Eman to bring home chocolate chip cookie dough so she could make cookies. But again, she didn't give a single cookie to Emani. Now, this may be jumping ahead a bit, but I think we can unfortunately see where this is going. But at future trials, it was stated that Emani got so weak from the lack of food that she could not leave her bed. She couldn't, like, pee or defecate. If she did, I think it was in the bed. And it was also stated in court that she would have smelled the food, and especially those cookies, whilst in her room. So she was just sitting there in her own waste, starving, smelling these cookies her stepmother wouldn't give her, smelling the meals her stepmother made and they were eating, but would not give her anything. I don't have words to put into how awful Tiffany is to Emani. And yes, it was stated also in court that starving to death is painful. Your stomach is, I forgot exactly what it's doing, so sorry about that, but it hurts. It's not a great way to go. On October 24th, 2013, Tiffany told Eman something was wrong with Emani. So he came home and he found her unresponsive and possibly having a seizure in the bathtub. So she was like shaking, like thrashing, her eyes were rolled back. So I mean, it could be a seizure. I don't know if it was ever like 100% confirmed, but he moved her out of the bathtub and put her in her bed and tried to feed her, but it was unsuccessful. She was probably too weak at this point to like actually eat, like physically eats like a non-starved person would eat. Like I feel like she would need a feeding tube or like an IV at this point. She needs emergency medical care, not just to be given like some saltines, but this continued for 4 days. I don't know if he tried to feed her all those days, but I guess he tried, quotations. But 4 days later, she passed away. So October 28th, 2013, Emani was gone. And she weighed only 32 pounds. 32. She was 10. I think I remember when I read that, that's like the average size of a 2 or 3-year-old. 32 pounds. I'm sorry, I'm getting hung up on that, but it just pisses me off. And it makes me sad. Because if you really just dislike this child so much and just didn't want her, like she has loving family members. Grandma is 100% willing to take her. She offered to keep her. Like, she fought to keep her in her custody. Emani had other people willing and wanting to help her and love her and have her live and have a good life. And Tiffany was just like, nah, let me just starve her. Like, and it did, for some reason you didn't like Grandma, I'm sure someone else in her family would have taken her. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. But fortunately, now we have to get to the aftermath. So Tiffany called Eman while he was at work saying, hey, Monty died. So he came home and he found her on the floor of her room and he wanted to call the cops, but Tiffany said, no, they can't do that. No one could know because she could lose her kids. Well, according to the law, Tiffany, you just lost one because you killed her. Okay, so she said you can't call the cops. And she also told Eman, gotta hide her body. So he wrapped her up in blankets and put her in the computer room, I guess. So it was said like the next couple days when Eman was not working, he would just spend time with her body and like crying, grieving for like multiple days in a row, which I still don't. I dislike Tiffany the most, but I'm also like, I'm not a fan of Eman either, but at least he seemed to have emotions, at least more than Tiffany. But Tiffany also, since she didn't want to lose her kids, she wanted them to cover up Emani's death and suggested burying her and just reporting her as a runaway, because she's already run away twice before. I mean, they'll believe us. And again, I'm not going to give all the details coming up because it can get pretty graphic again, but instead of just doing that, just burying her, which still isn't a great option. This whole situation isn't great. But instead, they put her body in a trash can and climbed in the car. They took their kids with them to find a secluded spot and burned her body in the trash can with their kids there. I at least hope they left them in the car, but knowing Tiffany. So after a while, honestly, I don't know how long they waited, but when they realized she wasn't turning to just pure ash, because even when you're cremated properly, you don't turn into just pure ash. There's bone fragments, there's some chunks. They put out the fire when they realized she wasn't just a little bit of dust and put her back in the car and decided to try something later. Just something else later. We'll figure it out tomorrow. So the next day at work, Eman, it was starting to get to him. So he told a friend at work, like, what happened? Because she was still in his car. So I probably was gnawing at him. And he told the coworker / friend that he was feeling suicidal due to this, which I can imagine. And the friend said, thankfully, call the police. He wouldn't at first, but he would at 4 a.m. later that night / early morning of the next day. You know what I mean. Now, he told Tiff he called the police, and she fled with their kids in the car, which I assume he must have expected that. But when the police arrived, Eman said Emani died from drinking some chemicals and that he panicked and tried to cremate her. Now, cops saw her body, what was left, I guess. They didn't believe him, thankfully. They arrested him, and surprisingly, Tiffany would later turn herself in. I don't know how much longer after. I don't think it was very long, but she turned herself in. Now, it's not hard for the police / investigators to put together what happened, especially since Tiffany turned herself in as well. So they didn't have to do a lot of sleuthing. So I'm gonna just kind of jump straight ahead to the trials and sentences. So we'll start with Eman first. So he did plead guilty to felony murder and concealing a death. And this was in 2015, he pled guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and he is currently at Smith State Prison in Glenville, Georgia. Now, he also agreed to testify against Tiffany since she rejected her plea deal. This is why, I guess, out of these two shitty parents, he's the better one, quotes around that. Like, he seemed to have some remorse. Granted, he wasn't, I can't say for certain he wasn't starving her. It goes back to earlier in the video when it said on the weekends when he was the primary caretaker, she would eat a lot. So, I mean, he was obviously giving her food on the weekends. I'm still not a fan of him. Now, but let's get on to old Tiffany, old Tiff. So her trial began 6 years after this happened. So April 15th of 2019, the jury was 6 men and 6 women. It was just noted that is it common for it to be evenly split? I don't know. Now, she chose to represent herself. Why? I don't freaking know. Even if you can't afford a lawyer, I think you get one from the state, unless it's different in Georgia. Honestly, I do kind of like that she just fumbled so hard with this, because as you can imagine, her representing herself went very badly. She didn't give an opening statement. She didn't do a closing argument or anything. No closing statements, arguments, whatever. There wasn't any cross-examinations, and there's a lot of witnesses. So as you can imagine, she was convicted. She was convicted on April 29th of all 6 counts, and the counts were 1 of malice murder, 2 of felony murder, 2 of cruelty of children, and 1 of concealing a death. If someone's more familiar with this, chime in. I know my grandma who watches probably would, but I don't understand the 2 felony counts of murder when it's just the 1 child. If you want to chime in. I mean, I'm all for giving her more shit to pile on because she sucks, but I just don't quite get it. And it took the jury less than 3 hours to deliberate. I'm honestly surprised it took that long. So on May 1st of 2019, she was handed the death penalty, and it was scheduled for between June 7th and 14th. So a bit over a month away. That is like the fastest in current American justice system that I've heard like a death penalty is gonna happen. Like on the books, let's go. I feel like very, very rare, in which, yeah, surprise to probably no one, she's still alive. With our justice system as a whole, and with the hem and haw pros and cons of the death penalty, she's still alive. She's on death row. She's currently held at Arendelle State Prison. Unfortunately, when I hear the name Arendelle, I think of Frozen. I hope they're just playing Let It Go in her cell 24/7. And she is actually the only female death row inmate in Georgia. And if she is ever executed, which we all know how death row works here, they could die from natural causes before a date is set. But if it does happen, her execution, she will be the 3rd lady in Georgia to have been executed since 1945, which is a very specific date. I didn't look into the significance of 1945. Sorry, this little bug. Probably to no one's surprise at this point, Tiffany tried to appeal her case. It did not work. So yes, they are both locked up forever, and one of them's on death row. Now, time to talk about the 2's biological kids, the 2 other children. So even though I think even to this day, Eman and Tiffany remain married, they thankfully, which I don't even know how they could keep custody anyway, but thankfully they lost custody of their 2 kids. And both Eman and Tiffany's mothers, they both at separate times tried to gain custody, and they both failed. They ended up, the two kids, getting adopted by their foster parents. And it was said the son, who was 3 at the time of Emani's death, does have some memories of the crime, but at the time in 2019, both kids were said to be doing good. I don't know how they're currently, but at least in 2019, it was said they were doing good. Now, I guess another teensy silver lining, which is sad that this situation had happened for this minuscule silver lining to happen, is there was some changes in law. Now, the GDFCS came under fire. Fair. I think very fair. Now, an intake case manager, a social service admin, and a program assistant were all fired, and others were reportedly disciplined. Reportedly disciplined. There we go. I don't know how many, it just said others and it said reportedly. Take that with a grain of salt. Some of the reforms and changes that came were deeper investigations. Good. New case managers and supervisors were brought on to help spread out the caseloads so it's not so much on so few people, which again, also good idea. Now, workers could no longer decide if someone gets an investigation based on a phone call alone, which is crazy that they could even do that. And a case could not be marked as low priority until meeting the child, which also seems like duh. And well, those are some of the changes. There is or was a lawsuit that happened in this. In 2018, Emani's grandma, Robin, who I mentioned at the beginning of the video, who Emani lived with for those 6 months, she filed a lawsuit against the GDFCS and the Department of Human Services for failing Emani, which I think it's fair. And honestly, I looked for a while. I could not find the status of this lawsuit. I slightly worried it may not happen, or it may have been dropped, I don't know, or maybe it was settled outside of court, but I feel like I would have seen if it was settled outside of court. They may not necessarily say for the amount or whatever, but normally they'll just say it was settled at least. So I am kind of bummed if it's just not happening. Granted, I know lawsuits can be a lot and draining, and I know they might just want to move on, but I feel like some consequences need to be had, not just on Tiffany and Eman's part. There was plenty of times the GDFCS could have stepped in and helped Emani, or the police. But if someone knows anything, maybe if you live in Georgia, is there local information? Is the lawsuit just slowly still going? I couldn't find an answer, and I am genuinely curious because I want her to win. And that is it. Although I think I was talking a lot longer than I intended, and I think I just ended up writing more than I intended as well. That is the sad case of Emani Moss. It just breaks my heart and pisses me off because Emani was 10 when she passed. Emani would be 23 years old this year. She's 4 years younger than me. Or she should be only 4 years younger than me. When I thought of it that way, it's just, she should be, I feel like she would have gone to college, could have, she just seemed like she had such a bright future. Who knows where she would have been at this point if she would have just stayed with her grandma. Or, not have Tiffany as a stepmother. It's just when I put it in that perspective that she's only 4 years younger, or she should be 4 years younger than me and alive and well, but it just hit a bit harder. Anyway, let me know what you think. I hope everyone will agree that Tiffany sucks. And if you happen to know anything about the lawsuit, if it's on or off or it's just slowly progressing, let me know. Well, I will see you next time. I don't know what it is. I'm hoping, I don't think it's a child, because the children it's always a bit rougher. Anyway, thank you for tuning in, even though it's a very long video. And bye, guys.